What's up, guys? Frugal BC, and I got a very familiar face next to me today. I'm sure you all remember John Woods, now the CTO of Nillion Association, previously the Algorand Foundation CTO, and Cardano before that. And you've had quite a history in the blockchain, and you're onto a new venture. And I thought a good place to start would be, your decision to leave the Algorand Foundation and join this smaller, not really a chain. I saw it described as the decentralized computer. I'm pretty interested in that aspect of it, but maybe John, you can kind of walk us through your decision and this new venture.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Sorry it took so long to kind of get back on a podcast in the Algorand ecosystem. It's just been a chaotic few months. New job, of course.
Right.
You're working hard on any new job.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I had a little baby girl. Who's now,
Oh, congrats.
thanks. Yeah, it's been good. No more babies for John, is
Mm.
what I would
Is,
say.
is she already drawing equations on the whiteboard?
No, no, she's just dribbling, but she's like 3 months old now, and she's great.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, so it's been lovely, but it's been a busy few months.
Mhm,
And so yeah, I've joined Nillion as chief technology officer of their association. Different words for different
mhm.
things, but it's basically the foundation, right? It's like the Nillion Foundation, essentially.
Yeah.
And so similar side of the business as I was on at Algorand. Um, and as you said, Nillion, and we can talk a little bit about it later on, but it's they call it the blind computer, and essentially it's not a blockchain. It has a token.
Mhm.
Okay, so there is a token, and you use the token to pay for compute and storage. But the product is not smart contracts. The product is not a blockchain. Although
Right.
some people do speculate on the token, of course, like people do with layer one tokens, like Algo or ETH. But the product really is, yeah, this idea of blind compute, blind storage, or more correctly, I think, private compute, private storage. How do you compute on things that are encrypted using a smorgasbord of cryptography things that you can do things like private AI inference, so running an AI model where what you say to it genuinely isn't retrievable, and indeed private storage, obviously easy to understand. How do you store things privately and make sure that stuff is bulletproof? And so it's a cool product. And as you said, I am doing some work to decentralize it, which happy to chat about later on, because I do think it's important that technologies like this are decentralized. So to talk about Algorand, you know, it's it was I think one of the most important roles I ever held in my career. I found it a wonderful place to work, wonderful ecosystem to work, and look back on it with nothing but joy. And I think even when I was leaving, and I posted on social media, I had like 400 or 500 messages from people. Essentially, 99% of them very, very kind. And I think we like I worked. I can't say I always think self praise is no praise, but I did genuinely work very hard at trying to
Mhm.
drive forward the Algorand ecosystem, whether that was socially, so talking on podcasts all over the world, being on stages all over the world, delivering news, everything from say Python and TypeScript all the way to the decentralization we did with the consensus incentives and the change around block rewards for Algorand. But also at the technical level, at the foundation, we used to have essentially just me and a couple of crypto people or cryptographers. But by the time I left after nearly 3.5 years there, we had, a small product team focused on delivering things like Liquid Auth and AlgoKit and many other bits and pieces.
Mhm.
We had infrastructure, so someone basically making sure the relays don't cost too much, making sure the staking is solid, making sure the network is operating correctly. We had people on engineering, of course, quite a capable engineering team. We had DevRel, of course, and then finally we had a small protocol team. So some people that are able to, and headed by Julio, who of course did the ZKP based privacy accounts on Algorand that some folks will have seen online. And
Mhm.
that is to make sure that if in the morning all the guys at Algorand Labs or Inc. or whatever, or Algorand Technology, sorry, were somehow not part of the team anymore for whatever reason, hurricane or an act of God or whatever, that we had at least some small set of people who understood how this all worked end to end. So a really flourishing team. And look, the price of Algo, just like the price of Nillion, goes up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
That is
Hmm.
the crypto market, and it's very competitive out there.
For
But I
sure.
do like to look back on the stuff that we did together as really quite substantive and important things.
Well,
And I think Algorand's never been in better shape, really. Yeah.
yeah, and I think your leaving was tough for a lot of people, because of that kind of dual role that you ended up holding. That you did become kind of the de facto spokesperson. I don't know if I asked you this before, but was that a very deliberate decision on the foundation's part or on yours, or did it kind of just evolve because I know you would start going on these interviews and you did a really good job selling the chain. I think you did a great job. You're very personable, and I found that even at at Decipher in Dubai when I met you, you were pretty personable, and I had a pretty good conversation with you,
Yeah.
short, and too bad we never got to connect on an interview there, but it was pretty pretty busy and chaotic.
It's
So,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, I guess I wonder, was it a deliberate decision or did it just sort of evolve that way?
Um, I kind of guess. I mean, somewhat deliberate. I mean, both. I was happy to take that role, and there was no one really filling it. I mean,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. Many members of Algorand Technologies speak on Spaces and are somewhat involved in the community, but typically not in video
Mhm.
format, not on stage.
Yeah.
Typically, of course, Silvio has had many interviews, etc., and he is public facing too, of course. But maybe not best positioned to fly over to Singapore and do a staking summit or something like that. So yeah, it was, I guess, a natural fit for me to get out there and talk about things. I enjoy speaking publicly. I'm still getting nervous, of course, here. If you're on stage in front of lots and lots of people, but
Mhm.
I enjoy it largely, and
Mhm.
also it's great to deliver on. I love showing people the work that we're doing, and much of the things I spoke about, of course, were things that were Algorand Foundation work. It was stuff like AlgoKit, the developer tools, consensus changes, etc. And so it was things that we were very much directly involved in. And so yeah, I guess I just kind of fell into it. But it was also, I guess, when it started seeming that I was well positioned to speak about it. And by the way, many other people at the foundation, of course, speak publicly as well. But it was
Mhm.
something that I certainly led the charge on. And yeah, it was good for me as well, because outside of being important for Algorand, it was great for me to have that experience. To be the face of something so important.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think when we first our first interview came as a result of me reacting to a video of you being on BitBoy Crypto,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think that was a pretty big deal for a lot of people in Algorand. People love or hate him, and if he followed the arc, that didn't end well for him. But it there's still, he had a huge show, and you got in front of a lot of people. What was that? What was that like being on that show?
Yeah, it was crazy. Well, not crazy, but it was interesting. Another thing is, just more broadly, in that role, working with Algorand, I got to meet all kinds of interesting people. I met
Mhm.
Anthony Scaramucci.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I met Vitalik. I met, I guess leaders of the industry. There's lots and lots of people, and
Mhm.
many people who are investors in the ecosystem and other things. And so it was very interesting. And fellas like BitBoy, right? So I would say a colorful experience for sure. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah,
Well, what have things been like with Nillion so far? What you think? You said it's about 3 or 4 months thereabouts, and tell me about
yeah.
that.
And look, I didn't really answer your question properly earlier on, so I'll answer it now. You
Mhm.
said, why did I leave Algorand? And so, before I talk about
No,
the great work that Nillion is doing, um,
totally.
yeah, so a few things. Like, so, I mean, one big part of it was when I joined, it was clear that like developer tools needed love,
Mhm.
and people out there who may not be developers may not see, or maybe are not super technical, they may not see the difference between, say, PyTeal and Python, or Teal and TypeScript, and all these kind of like language buzzwords. But essentially, you got to make it really easy, you got to make it really fun. It's got to be like building your first iPhone app, right? And Apple make that a great experience.
Mhm.
And so the things we did with AlgoKit really packaged and brought together in a basket all of the tools you needed for build, test, and deploy. And it also brought together, it also brought languages that were normal, languages you could ask ChatGPT about. If you ask ChatGPT about PyTeal, it'll start imagining things, because it's just not, it's not trained on a deep enough data set. When you ask it about Python or TypeScript, of course, it's trained very deeply, and so it's able to answer those questions. And so, I felt like probably the biggest thing I needed to work on when I got there objectively, because it wasn't, the protocol was in pretty good shape. It was, it was fast enough. It was decentralized to some degree, and of course now much more so with the incentives.
Mhm.
Was really that developer experience. I kind of feel like we nailed that. I don't think there's a ton left to do. There's not like an order of magnitude more work to do on that. Then I was very interested in kind of course, building out the teams, which we did, DevRel, etc., and we took them at the foundation, home DevRel at the foundation, and then I guess the other really significant piece of work was all around, decentralization. So that's like peer-to-peer work that we did, the work we did pushing forward consensus incentives and the design on that, and then finally the implementation. And I think objectively, when you look at that stuff, you look at the decentralization of Algorand now, the percentage of the stake that's owned by the public versus what it was like before. It is just a fucking straight win. It's a straight win across the board. And so it did feel like I had done essentially the big things I set out to do. It wasn't like I was kind of joined a company, said I'd do lots of big things, and then kind of walked away without doing them. So that was one big reason. I did feel like my contribution, really, I had done what I set forth to do. The second thing was I was very ambitious. I guess I still am very ambitious. And when you're the face of something like an Algorand, and I say the face because like it's my face that's tagged, it's my face that's like, chatted about when people are talking about price, etc. And so when you're that person, you need to be able to be, well, I felt like I needed to be able to answer to the public. So I'd get questions like, in the community, I would get questions like, where's the roadmap? What are you doing? What's next? Where's the next consensus incentives? What's next for, Algokit? What's next for this or that? And because I worked at the foundation, the scope of my role, albeit very well respected by my peers at Technologies and by people at the foundation, and albeit by the community, was a foundation role. And so I didn't have commit access to the source code of Algorand. And so just to be clear, for folks who are maybe technical or not super technical out there, essentially, at no point did I ever have the ability to change the code of Algorand directly. I would have to go through our technology partner, right? Which is how things were set up from the beginning, and that's normal. But what this did was it limited the impact I could have. So I talked about the little protocol team I put together with Julio, with Steve, with Cosimo and a few guys there, right? And they were doing objectively great shit, objectively cool stuff, and there was no guarantee that the work that they would do would be accepted by the technologies company. Okay, and then similarly, let's say I cared about doing quantum, like the things I wanted to do next were really privacy, post quantum, and other things like that. Again, it wasn't something I could unilaterally drive forward, right? I had to work with other folks, and so it's very difficult when you're working across two entities. And the guys at Technologies, of course, naturally don't report directly to me, so I can't tell them what to do, and I can't set the roadmaps. And so, in a way, it's kind of perverse, right? Because I'm the guy who people are looking to for what's next, but I can't guarantee or promise that because I have a dependency on another company. Now, I'm not trying to imply that they weren't working hard or they weren't trying hard. I think that they are, and they do. But it put me in a position where my next ambition was to change protocol level things much more directly. With consensus incentives, I was part of that design. I wrote the original paper, and we worked together as a team to get it across the line. But to do these other things, it would have required much more direct work on the protocol together. And with the structure and the arm's length agreement between labs and foundation, etc., it just wasn't possible for me to achieve those ambitions. And so I looked at something like Solana or Cardano, and I said, for us to get there, I feel like we have to do certain things that I feel I cannot do in my current position. And so for those reasons, and for the reason that I felt like I had achieved what I had wanted to achieve largely, I took the decision to move to something which is, I think, very important. And that is, of course, now quite sexy, which is privacy. So
no, we're going to get into the privacy thing for sure. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that scenario in one way or another because I went on my own. I'm now an independent operator in the local news business here. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I had the same frustrations. It was like I was in charge of this paper, but also I felt like I didn't really have the power to make any kind of changes that I would need to make it successful. So I started building my own. product, and eventually that got big enough I could go on my own, and it's more effective because like I can actually control what I need to control, and if I want to try something, I can try it.
Right, and you kind of said at the start of the call, I have kind of gone from very like if you want like tier one
Hmm.
projects, Ethereum, Cardano, okay, top 10 kind of categories, to Algorand, which is say a little bit in the next peloton, let's say, top 50,
Yeah.
top 40, or hopefully
Hmm.
top 30, top 25, where it should be.
Right.
And then now to Nillion, which is like top 400, top 500 or whatever.
Hmm.
And so, but the thing is, when you do that, when you move to smaller startups, of course, you get typically more autonomy, and that's great. So you can kind of
Hmm.
make more radical change. And the second thing you get is that typically, because the ecosystem is so new, you can really grow it in it. You can learn from the mistakes of other projects that are like 5 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, and you can try to avoid some of those pitfalls. Not all of them are avoidable. It's very difficult, for example, to distribute a token in a way that there's a nice spread or distribution of holders, etc. It's very difficult to decentralize projects and have good uptime or never have any downtime. These things are really hard, but at least you can see what Algorand did great around having great uptime, or you can look at, say, Cardano, and you can say, wow, look how they built that incredible community, and try to learn from from,
Hmm.
from the best of those things with something that is new. And yeah, of course, the other two things to say are, one, I've always deeply cared about privacy. In fact, Monero is what got me into the crypto space.
Yeah.
I think it's a fundamental human right, and like it's critical, I think, in both cryptocurrency and in real life. Um, and two, I think that the technologies that Nillion are working on are going to be transformational. But of course, it's not a blockchain, so it's not competing with Algorand nor Cardano nor anything else in the blockchain space directly. The token for Nillion is about paying for the compute and storage services. It's not about smart contracts or anything like that.
Hmm. So I did some reading about Nillion since we have this interview coming up. I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand it. It sounded really cool. I guess the thing I didn't quite get a sense of is this enterprise focused or retail focused or both?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in its current form, and let me just describe Nillion, because like people are like,
Yeah.
you go to a website and we're going to redo the website. We know that the website needs work. I think it's hard when you look at the website to understand what we do. So let me just try
Hmm.
to explain what it is. Nillion is a collection of software. It's like a GitHub repo. On that GitHub repo, there's software we've written that allows you to do private compute using various cryptographic primitives. So maybe using homomorphic encryption, using zero knowledge technologies, using TEEs or trusted execution environments, using MPC, and similarly, it uses technologies like that to store data privately. And so when you instantiate this software, when you run a copy of Nillion, you're running a computer program that allows you to privately compute, privately do AI, as in LLM inference, more technically, or privately
Hmm.
store data. But the Nillion nodes all around the world, let's say there's like, I don't know, let's say there's 100 of them, okay? They are not talking to each other. They're not like, all the Algorand nodes, they talk to each other, right? They're in consensus. They're in
Yeah.
this loop of like creating new blocks, and they all agree every time. With Nillion, it's not like that. So Nillion is not decentralized the way Algorand is, where they're all in consensus. In fact, Nillion is kind of federated. It's like email servers. There's email servers at Google. There's email servers at Citibank. There's email servers, I don't know, at Target. Okay,
Sure.
but they can talk to each other, but they're not always talking to each other. Like
Hmm.
some guy at Citi might email Target to complain, but like there's not a direct connection constantly between Citi and Target, right?
I got you.
And so we call that, when things are like that, we call that kind of topology or network layout, we call it federated. So it's like, yeah, they can talk to each other. Yeah, you can use them together, but they're kind of sovereign instances of software. Okay,
Hmm.
so now we have what I described is like loads of Nillion instances all over the world. Each of these things is like a blind computer. You can do some compute on it privately. You can do some storage on it privately. And you can be confident because you don't just have to trust that I said it was private. When you run your code on it, let's say you've asked your LLM some naughty questions. You've had your sex chat with your LLM, and now you feel embarrassed. So when you're finished, you actually get a cryptographic attestation. You get a mathematical proof that your code was run privately, so you can verify it yourself. Okay, so you're thinking to yourself, well, how does this work? you've got all these instances of Nillion. I'm telling you that they can do private compute and storage. And when you're finished using one of them, you get this proof that everything was groovy, and you can check it. Okay, so where does the token come in? The token comes in that you use the token directly. You give the token essentially to the node operators or the Nillion operators, and that's how they receive money to do work, because of course running these computers costs money. And then I was looking at this, and that's how it kind of works today. And I was saying, wow, what'd be really cool is if, and but sorry, not just me. I don't want to make it sound like it's all my idea. Like, I want to call out like Andre and Dave and other guys and Demetrius at my current company who've been working on this with me, and many of these ideas are theirs. So I don't like stolen valor. But so when we looked at this, we thought, wow, like how can we make this more decentralized, more like a Web3 thing? Because right now it's more like email servers, right? They're cool, but they're not connected. And so we're going to decentralize Nillion by a bit like Algorand, actually. Okay, by having the community run nodes, little nodes, like not like a big heavy nodes like Raspberry Pi, Mac Mini, simple nodes that check these attestations for you. So all those like cryptographic proofs that my compute was private, that'll be checked by the community in a decentralized web, right? A decentralized network of node operators. They'll check that stuff, and they will report to users. There'll be a big red flag if one of your if your compute wasn't private, or if your storage is invalid. And so we'll kind of have this like network or sea of operators, sea of node runners that are checking the veracity or correctness of the network all the time, like securing the network. And for that, they'll earn nil. So if you have nil, you'll stake your nil to one of these nodes. And then just like Algorand, you stake your algo, you make more algo. You'll stake your nil, you make more nil. But I wanted it to be real. I wanted it that like it wasn't just like inflation, like you're getting algo for nothing, you're getting nil for nothing. I wanted the people to be doing something useful. And by rolling this out, we're calling it Nillion 2.0, right? But by rolling out this decentralization piece, the community are involved. They're doing useful work. They're checking the network. They're letting people know if there's problems, which there shouldn't be, but like, it's good to have this checking. And they can earn nil for doing this. And so we're kind of going to essentially add a decentralization layer under the federation layer. And ultimately, what this achieves is real privacy, apps that are private by design, that are private by implementation, and essentially a private AWS. This is like a private AWS where the correctness of all of the compute and storage is done in a decentralized way. So not a blockchain. You're not running smart contracts. You're running real apps. I say real apps. Like you're running Doom. You're running a web server. You're running not a discrete piece of code that's small and boxed, but a long running application, an LLM. And that's the product. And I think it's very cool. So it's different to Monero and Zcash. It's not trying to do payments privately, or Hermes Vault and Algorand that uses zero knowledge to do private payments. It's not trying to do that. It's
gotcha.
It's a private compute.
So if I'm understanding it right, if this is I'd probably be a builder that would be incorporating Nillion into my project. Is that the main target?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't answer your question again. Yeah, is it business to business or business to consumer? I guess it's really more of a business to business product.
Okay.
So it would be the kind of person or guy who is currently using Amazon, maybe Nitro enclaves, or is currently using Azure's equivalent of that, or GCPs, who'll be like, you know what? Maybe I should do this in a decentralized way. Maybe I should like shift my stack away from just like Amazon, which by the way is a great product, of course, and it's fairly federated itself. It's got regions all over the world, and build on a technology stack that I pay for with a Web3 token that is secured by a community. But there's nothing to stop. Just like Algorand is kind of business to business to a degree, right? Like it's typically larger businesses, like Folks Finance, right? Or any of the big kind of companies that have built on Algorand. It's typically those companies that are basically the front for the customers. So the customers interact with those things, but it's really companies building on platforms like Algorand, and indeed Nillion too. But if you're a smaller customer, if you're a hobbyist, you're a guy at home and just wants to play with these things, or a girl at home wants to play with these things, you can do so.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And if I was buying the token, I guess I'd be buying into the vision would be the idea.
Right. And so like prior to this change, and by the way, just to be clear, because I want to be intellectually honest here. The things I'm talking about, the decentralized checking layer, that's like checking all of the compute and storage and everything else, and it's all Web3. we are in design phase now, and we're going to be rolling out hopefully by Christmas. So it's not like years
Okay,
away; it's like a couple of months away. But like,
cool.
phase one will be out by Christmas, and it should be complete within the first 6 months of 2026, I would say. But we'll see how it goes. But prior to this, when you buy the token, you're basically buying a load of gas. You're buying a load of tokens that can be used for compute and storage, and you can speculate on that. But
Mhm.
now, after this change comes in, you're buying a part of the network. You're buying into the security of the network. You're able to earn directly by staking your tokens and securing the network. And you own a part of the network, right? And so that's, actually, really, that is the core insight behind why I wanted to make this change. I wanted to get the token much closer to the stack, and I also wanted the community as part of it, because if we're Nillion to grow to Algorand size, we need an Algorand style community of evangelists, developers, people like you who are journalists and people who promote essentially evangelism, of course. And so to get there, you have to weave the community into your platform.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it sounds really cool. Even when I read about it, I thought this sounds like some really interesting technology that's like solving a real problem, which is always one of my rubrics for Web3 is like, and I think it's a question a lot of projects, both on the, both on the blockchain side. I know Nillion is not a blockchain, but
Sure.
on the protocol side of it, and then like the apps on it, like some of them just have a really hard time answering what problem does this solve. And sometimes I think it's like not really solving a problem. It's like designed for speculation. So I appreciate that Nillion seems to be solving a real problem. I think that's really awesome. I kind of want to go back a little broader. And before I do that, chat, I do see you. I'm probably going to try to answer some, well, maybe save the last 10 minutes or so for some chat questions. So we'll get to those.
Let's
But I
do
kind
it.
of want to zoom out. And by the way, if you haven't hit the like button already, appreciate that. Go ahead and hit it. Like I say, you don't have to smash it. You can just press it gently. Works just fine that way too. Big shout out to our sponsors, Haystack, the mobile app that makes trading on Algorand so much easier, and Marcus Aurelius, NFT and meme coin project on Algorand that spreading the wisdom of Stoicism, which I dig for sure. So check those out in the description.
Just
But
to be,
going back,
I've got Haystack right there. Just to be clear, I want to be
there he
clear.
goes. There he goes.
Haystack.
Look at. Yeah, and John, I saw John said hi. Says he misses you, so he was in the chat earlier. So I want to go. Speaking of kind of what we were just talking about, I kind of want to zoom back out, and I mean, this might be an impossibly broad question, but what are your thoughts on like the state of crypto right now? Like, I don't know, what's like, is there anything eating you or anything like they see that you really trends that you like, or I guess like I said, it's a pretty broad question. You can kind of take it however you see fit.
Yeah. I think maybe talking about the markets at large, okay, like without talking about any particular cryptocurrency, if I just look at like the entire market right now, I think last time I looked, it was like maybe 2 trillion or something like that, or 3 trillion. What are we at now? We're at 3.4 trillion. So if I look at 3.4 trillion, and I consider, say, all of the worth of all these digital assets, which I've said before, are they're self-sovereign, they're permissionless, they're censorship resistant. These are very important things. And so, when I look at the kind of total market cap of crypto, and I'm just trying to get a stat here. That's why I'm half talking. Okay, good. Sorry, a typical person who can't do more than one thing at once. When I'm looking at that, say 3.4 trillion, I'm thinking to myself, is that commensurate with all of the value that these digital assets bring? Now, I know there are some things in the top 100 or even outside there that you're kind of asking yourself, like, do I really need a perpetual 100x leverage future on fart coin? Is that really enhancing human life in any kind of meaningful way? Of course not. But by and large, I think most of the projects out there are trying to do something interesting. They're trying to crowdsource AI, LLM training. They're trying to decentralize finance, which is critically important, by the way. Even though Nillion doesn't specifically focus on that, DeFi, the more you interact with CeFi, the more you realize how important DeFi is.
Yeah.
And so, do we have growth from here? I think yes, and I'm a heavy bull on this. And like, so what do you got to do? You got to compare that 3.4 trillion with other things that are worth 3.4 trillion, and then say, is my self-sovereign entire digital asset class worth something similar that's worth that kind of value. And so you have Apple or Nvidia, obviously very important consumer and business electronics companies. Okay, would you say that the value of all of those of this digital asset infrastructure is worth something like those companies? I would say it's even more important. And then you look at something as simple as gold. 10 years ago, gold had like an $11 trillion market cap or something like that. Today, it's closer to 30 trillion. So gold, which
Hmm.
I get that we can use on rockets and in teeth and in medical things, and gold is not just shiny and expensive. It can be used, and it's desirable, and jewelry and blah 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 blah. But 30 trillion, 10 times the value of all these digital assets that enable permissionless freedom, financial freedom, self sovereignty. The fact that I can walk into New York with 24 words of my butt and walk in there with $100 million. These things I think are critically important. And so I'm like a bull case for crypto in general, and I think
Hmm.
in my personal view, we're going to see a lot of growth from here. So that's one aspect. That's one lens, and from a tech point of view, I would say that I'm seeing more substance than ever before. And I suppose naturally you have to do that, right? It's like each year Apple launched the iPhone. They say this is the greatest iPhone we've ever released. I mean, I would hope so.
Right.
But so I know we're at the front of time right now, and history is behind us. But for me,
Hmm.
when I look at at the state of tech, at the kind of work that's out there, the even Zcash. I've been very critical of Zcash. I'm a Monero holder. I didn't like a whole bunch of things about Zcash. I didn't like the dev tax. I didn't like the trusted setup. I wasn't a big fan of Zuko. I didn't like the fact that there was implied backdoors. I didn't like what else didn't I like? I don't like the centralization. I don't like the fact that it's
Hmm.
as in like the 70% of the hash rates in one mining pool. I don't like the fact that its default option is opt-in privacy. It's not privacy by default. I don't like the fact that the anonymity set is small. But now I had to look back at Zcash because like Zcash is now like number 18 in the coin market cap. And I'm like, what the hell? I thought that thing was dead. I look at Zcash and what it actually turns out is that yeah, sure, the dev tax is still there. Yeah, sure, uh, some centralization is still there in the mining pools, but it's now their core wallet is now privacy by default. Uh, they've removed the trusted setup, so basically transactions are essentially there's no trust component in the zero knowledge primitive. And you know what? I'm not sure if it deserves the run it's just had, but it is definitely worthy of being in the top 50. I think it's an interesting project now. And so, when
Hmm.
I look, and I could say this about many, many other things, Algorand, Cardano, uh, other technologies that are out there, I think, and Nillion too. And I think, the technology is really maturing. And I think you mentioned earlier are we still searching for a use case? I don't think so. I think a lot of these projects are now,
Hmm.
as I said, for Algorand for many years, fit for purpose. And so it's a cool time. It's a cool time to work in the industry.
Nice. Well, going on that, and maybe this is like a little bit of a counterpoint, but so I've been following this trend because Silvio announced the fiat chain, and the
Hmm.
implications seem to be that most corporations don't want to interact with a public blockchain. They maybe want some privacy. We saw that with TravelX on Algorand, where once they started working with some of the bigger airlines, they weren't really interested in the public blockchain. I guess I find that trend a little concerning, but also there's part of me that thinks, well, maybe crypto isn't meant to like power traditional finance. Maybe crypto or traditional companies. Maybe crypto is meant to power new startups that challenge those institutions. But I wonder what you kind of think about that trend, because I also find interesting Chainlink that they offer both a on-chain and off-chain solution set. And now they've got this mechanism where they're taking some of those off-chain profits and putting it back onto Link, which is an interesting mechanism. I guess what do you think about the fiat chain and this trend of like maybe like some of these large companies don't necessarily want to interact with like a public blockchain. Maybe they want their own private one.
Yeah, it's a good question. I used to worry about it a lot more, and I don't worry
Mhm.
about it as much anymore. I don't think it's as big a hurdle, and I'll tell you why. Um,
Interesting.
Number one, like, I think sometimes it's like in life, even now, say a father of three children, in my 40s, I look back and I say, what, when did I get old? When did I start dating a 40-year-old woman? When did I have 3 kids? Right? It's like you don't realize how
Mhm.
far you've come sometimes,
Mhm.
and I think crypto's like that. You like if I had told you 10 years ago that like it'd be held by major institutions, major hedge funds, VCs will be in it, it'd be
Mhm.
worth $3.4 trillion, you wouldn't have believed it probably. And I think we shouldn't discount how much legitimacy the industry has achieved, and how far it's come more broadly. And I think stablecoins and Circle and other companies like that, which we may or may not like, because they're not very Web3 ish, or they're not very crypto degen or cypherpunk. They've done a lot to advance the general acceptance. Uh, Number two, obviously, the US still leads much of the financial world. And I think we're seeing, of course, a much friendlier reg environment there and in other places. I'm just back indeed from Switzerland, where Nillion is headquartered. And again, quite a generally reg friendly attitude towards crypto. And if the regulators are cool with it, so are big companies. It
Mhm.
just takes them a little bit of time to feel like there's no risk. And then number three, I often see things like Algorand, or which is, say, a decentralized asset, right? Or Ethereum, or these kind of large smart contract platforms. They're essentially pools of liquidity. They're essentially a large decentralized liquidity pool. When
Mhm.
when you when you bridge your value into that, let's say you're a Starbucks or something, and you're you've got your private Nillion instance. You're not using Nil. You're using dollars. You're running Algorand privately, and you're not on them. You're not connected to mainnet, and you've lost much of the value proposition in my view, because you don't have the self sovereignty anymore. You don't have the decentralization. You don't have the security properties. You don't have the censorship resistance. But let's say you choose to do that. You're excluding yourself from an enormous liquidity pool. Like, I look at these cryptocurrencies as basically just huge funds. They're like just a huge collection of people with wealth
Mhm.
and money. And so I think, money talks. And at the end of the day, much of these financial institutions, let's say, for example, they issue some asset or some product, or some NFT or something on a private chain, they're going to have demand from users to have exposure to those liquidity pools, in my view, to have exposure to that trading volume and trading environment. And so I think you'll see a natural desire to get to the public. And so I guess what I'm trying to say in a nutshell, in a simple sentence, is companies that build completely off chain, away from public networks, are essentially excluding themselves from the public markets. And I see technologies in Web3 like basically like essentially like the future of the markets. They're the future Nasdaq, essentially.
That's a really great answer, actually. Definitely going to give me some food for thought. I'm going to think about that later because I thought that was a really interesting perspective. So, long time ago, we talked about ISO 20022 and how it has nothing to do with the underlying crypto. This whole thing of ISO 20022 compliant coin is complete nonsense. And I thought it was interesting because after that, there seemed to be like a year or two period where I saw nothing. It just completely died, that whole meme. And then now I've been seeing it resurface. And I kind of want to ask about like these broader things, that these memes that come up and how crypto is very meme focused. I don't know. What do you think about that? Why do these things keep popping up? Why can't we like quash some of these silly ideas?
Yeah, it's. By the way, I've seen that too. I've seen that
Yeah.
ISO 2020 whatever come up, and of course,
Yeah.
like I said before, it's just a messaging standard. If you've got a free text field in your transaction, then you too are compliant.
Mhm.
So the whole thing is just silly. As I said before, Algorand is not compliant.
Yep. I get that repeated back to me a lot, by the way.
But by the way, this applies to everything. Nillion is
Mhm.
not compliant. Can be
Right.
compliant if we stick the ISO messages in our nil database. Like,
Right.
so. Um, but yeah, I mean, the world though is more memeified.
That's
Like,
true.
like even just like forget about crypto, just like GameStop, GameStop stock
Yeah.
is a meme. Like, I think like Tesla stock is a meme. The whole, I think and why did that happen? And I think actually the internet is the answer. The internet has basically
Mm.
allowed collective consciousness to come together, and it ebbs and flows like a murder of crows, and you end up
Yeah.
essentially with people stampeding all in the same direction, hoping to make a quick buck. And so I don't think it's ever going away. I think the day we had real-time communications, and added to that, so that's the internet, and of course, and added to that,
Mhm.
we had essentially uncontrolled, largely digital assets, or certainly
Mhm.
assets that were essentially non-permissionless or non-permissioned. That's the day that like the meme took over. And so I think it's here to stay, and it's for good and for bad. You know,
Yeah.
I quite like to see social. I'm a libertarian, and that's just to be clear, that's not a liberal. That is someone who doesn't like government interference. Um, and
Mhm.
so like I think it's good that we have these platforms to push back against government control, digital IDs, privacy invasion. I think it's good that like I don't want my iPhone scanning my images for wrongdoing. I don't want
Mhm.
someone in my DMs with my wife making sure I'm not saying things that are inappropriate. Like fuck
Mhm.
off. Like, and that's why I think
Right.
privacy is critical. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. No, I think it's interesting because it is like crypto is so internet focused, I guess, or driven. I
Mm,
think so. If the internet is memeified in general, then of course that would translate. So that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
So you might have to be careful how you address this, but ask you like what kinds of things do you do personally in crypto? Like, what are your favorite use cases? And that can be investment wise, it can be non-investment wise. And then tacked onto that, I am curious if you're still running an Algorand node.
So I'm still running an Algorand node, and still holding Algorand. And so, of course, like when I worked at Algorand, I bought Algo. I was awarded Algo, over the course of the 3 years I was there. And so I still very much believe in the future of Algorand, and I hold it alongside the other cryptocurrencies that I think are valuable. And so, I'm quite a traditionalist in the sense that like I typically don't jump onto the latest thing. So I've been holding a bag of Monero for a long time, and I think it'll do very well from here. Personally, I obviously can't predict the future, and so you shouldn't buy it just because I think it's going to do well. But I think privacy and
Mhm.
payments is really important, and I think a large anonymity set is really important. And so, um, as in strong functional privacy, not just like tech babble. And so,
Right.
I think both Monero and Zcash will do well over time. And so, I typically sit though in like I worked for Ethereum, so I have some ETH. I worked for Algorand, I keep Algo, and then I got into crypto because of Monero. There's no Monero Foundation or Monero company, so I bought Monero. But like typically in those assets, quite simple. I don't have kind of a big fat bag of random meme coins, except for the meme coins that I bought on Algo for the lulz because they were funny, and I still hold all of them. Um, and then outside of that, I'm very much someone who brings cryptography and privacy into my personal life. So, for example, the same Algorand keys that I use for Algo, I use to cryptographically sign things or to prove that I am speaking in certain contexts. And it is actually me because, oh, well, John, he owns that woods.algo account. So if he can sign something with that key, a plain text message, it proves that I'm talking to the actual guy here, not just some bot on Discord or not just
Right.
some, troll on Telegram. So that's number one.
Mhm.
And number two, in terms of like just like computing, I use cryptography every single day. I use GPG for encrypting things and for signing digital messages. I use Edwards 25519 keys for SSH so I can talk to my computers remotely. I use Pi-hole to block ads and do DNS level filtering of web things that I do. And then I use
Mm.
WireGuard. So if I'm staying in a hotel, if the hotel just sees me with an encrypted connection to my home, and that's basically it. They don't see anything I'm doing. And so more broadly, I think crypto started off as a cypherpunk movement against the banks. The original idea was, hey, let's have an
Mhm.
asset class outside the scope of quantitative easing, outside the scope of seigniorage by issuance of currency by a fiat entity like a central bank. And it lost its way a little bit. I think some of that core idea. And so I like to see some of those ideals creep back in. And so I try to be cypherpunk in terms of how I interact with things. And yeah, and typically the influence there is I only buy quality projects that I truly believe in. Um, and there's a very few of them. Nillion is one, or I wouldn't be working there. Algorand is one, Monero is one, Cardano is
Mhm.
one, Bitcoin is one, ETH is one. But outside of that, I don't have a lot. One thing I am interested in, um, and I'll wind up this answer now in a sec, is Hyperliquid. At first, I was a little bit skeptical of it, but more recently, just using it And again, there's still centralization elements. The hyper liquid foundation essentially are staking most of the hype in order to secure the network. And there's some
Mhm.
sustainability questions around that and some decentralization questions. But more broadly, as a user experience, as a product offering, the liquidity that's available there. Some of these products, by the way, are dangerous. Of course, the leverage products. Of course, you can lose your shirt. But like, it's still
Mhm.
cool that that level of complex financial product is out there, and the way they buy back the token and that whole kind of ecosystem, to me, is quite interesting.
Nice. That's cool. Well, I could ask you like a ton more questions, but we'll maybe save that for next time because we're getting close. So I want to give the
Sure.
chat a little bit of let's see. Green Blue Algo asked, "Will Algorand play well with Nillion? What are John's thoughts on an ideal structure for the new incorporation that is Algorand? What do you think about that?"
So will Algorand play well with Nillion? Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're going to be rolling out very soon as part of this decentralization plan uh, a kind of a new way to interact with Nillion from other cryptocurrencies. And so Algorand would, of course, be at the top of the list there, and it would be super cool. And the second question there was, sorry, I missed the second piece.
Oh yes. He asked, "What are your thoughts on an ideal structure for the new incorporation that is Algorand?"
I got it. Sorry, yeah. Okay, so I think, earlier on I said one of the reasons I left was because I didn't feel like I could exert the type of, maybe control is the wrong word, but influence that I wanted over
Mhm.
the code base and over the protocol direction. And and um and I think the ideal solution is to have the treasury, essentially what's usually the foundation side of things, together with the engineering. And so I would like to see a world where there's a unification of, and I don't know whether this is possible legally or not, blah 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 blah. But for to have the ink and the foundation closer together, or technologies and the foundation closer together, so that they are pulling in a much more unified direction. That would be what I would hope for there, and how I would construct it if I was doing so.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It seems like you're just introducing layers of bureaucracy if you have these two things separated, and I think those kind of things. Like I always think. I guess I'm always surprised when I see bureaucracy in crypto because I think of crypto, like you said, the cyberpunk kind of mentality, and I think it seems like to me the mentality should be more startup focused. Like let's be
Sure.
nimble. Let's maybe move fast and break things a little bit. Maybe not as much on the breaking things, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, I do. But for what it's worth, by the way, just I'm not a lawyer or anything, but like there's reasons why this complexity was introduced. At the time,
Mm,
Algorand wasn't, established. As far as I understand, the reg environment globally wasn't as friendly, and you needed these
true.
barriers and separations legally. And not that I know that much about it, but there was reasons for
Hmm.
doing that before. But if we're
Yeah, fair
now in a
enough.
world where you can bring these things together, I think one should.
No, that makes sense. I do wonder, I know a lot of crypto companies are now responding to the new US administration, and they're more favorable towards crypto, and I wonder if like there should be some caution though, because administrations are only for 4 years. Who knows who could come in next? And maybe
Sure.
AOC is the president in 2028, and then she shuts down crypto again. I don't know. I'm curious what you think of that, because it does seem like the US kind of sets the tone maybe for how the rest of the world thinks about crypto to some degree.
It does. I agree with you. I think that, like, you can't put the horse back in the box. Does that make sense? I don't know what you put back in the box. Like, the horse is bolted
Mm,
from the stable or whatever. I
yeah,
feel like there's kind of no putting this away. It's not like it gets to go away. Like, there's too many major players involved with it. There's too many super rich people involved with it, and so I don't see a world where we're going to see, you know, authoritarian wipeout of crypto. It just doesn't make sense. And on top of that, its raison d'etre is to resist that. But of course, we could
yeah,
see a world where you would have a government after the current Republican government, which are less friendly. But I don't see it. I really don't, because it's only damaging to do so. And all it takes is not to eradicate these things, but to just make sure that people are behaving properly. And so I think what regulation is supposed to be is no one takes the piss. no one like
Yeah.
robs other people or like defrauds other people. And I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
Like, we shouldn't do those things.
Right.
But you also shouldn't stifle innovation. You shouldn't, because you don't
Agreed.
understand something, say, well, I'm not having that. And I think we're past that. And I think they've learned from the environment that was there prior to the current administration that trying to distance yourself from this stuff really just distances you from innovation.
Hmm. I think from the people too.
Yeah.
I think there's millions of crypto holders in the U.S. and I think they're going to vote. And there's now a pretty crypto lobby too. So I think that makes a big difference. Well,
Some of the
John, I
smartest
really
people I
appreciate.
know are in crypto, like quite literally,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on, John. It was good to catch up with you. And I wonder if there's any last words of advice you'd want to give to both to. I want to split this up. One for just everyday folk in crypto, what they should be, how they should be thinking about crypto, and then part two would be like maybe budding engineers who might be thinking about getting into crypto.
Sure. It's a great question.
I'll
For
let you think
for
about
everyday
that a
folk,
little. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. For everyday folk, I would just say, the simplest bit of advice I would have is just make sure you understand socially and technically as best you can what you're buying. Don't just buy something because your friend said it was good. Uh, I once had a pal who worked at me at a central bank, in Central Bank of Ireland, and I worked there with him. And he had bought loads of, I don't know if folks will remember this. If you Google it, you'll see it. It was called BitConnect. Okay, it was one of the
Oh
things that
yeah.
went to actual zero, but it was on fire. It went from like $1 to like, I don't know, $1,000 or something. Um, and like I sat with him at lunch one day, and I'd said to him just casually, he was like, "Oh, man, this BitConnect is awesome," and I was like, "Dude, that is a absolute scam. In any man's language, that's a scam." And he exited that position that night just based on what I'd said to him, because I must have freaked him out a little bit. The next day, it zeroed. And he came to me, like he came over to my desk and he was like, "Dude, I just want to say like thanks for that." And I was like, "Thanks for what?" And he's like, "Have you not seen?" And I looked it up, and it was just like look. It was look, right? That he had a chat that I had
Right.
read bad things about it. And like he had his family's money in it or whatever,
No.
and and so as best you can, try to understand the social and technical aspects of projects, and the distribution of the token, right? It's very important. That's one thing I'd say. For people who want to get more involved, and by the way, I would just take this opportunity, if you don't mind, just to say,
Mhm.
like I said, Nillion's not a blockchain, so I'm not trying to like pull people from Algorand to switch blockchain sides or anything like that. Like I said, I still hold Algo, still very much love the project. For folks out there who are interested, though, in trying this privacy stuff, I'd love you to come and check out Nillion. As always, my DMs are open. I still follow all of you in the ecosystem. You're still my friends.
Mhm.
Just come, let's chat. I'd love to let you get involved. And help you get involved, and check out Nillion, some of the cool shit you can do there. And already some people from Algorand are already talking to me about it.
Yes.
And then for folks who want to get involved, I would just say, don't feel like you have to. This is one thing I'll say, right? Don't feel like you have to qualify as some kind of blockchain dev. I don't think there is such a thing as a blockchain dev. In my book, there are engineers and there are people who are not engineers. And if you're someone who is an engineer, you aspire to kind of build software, then you're already in the category of people who can get involved with Web3, or technologies like Algorand or Nillion or others like that. All it takes is a little itty bitty understanding of distributed systems and a little itty bitty understanding of cryptography, this kind of public key, private key stuff. And you can get all of that from my favorite book, and probably the book that taught me the most within the shortest amount of time. Very, very easy read, really not hard, not loads of math in it or anything. It's called Serious Cryptography by Jean-Philippe Amasson, JP Amasson, Serious Cryptography. The old version was an orange book. The new version is a blue book. And if you're someone who's already on the journey, as you will be probably, to understand software, what an if statement is, how do I write some code, how do I print hello? If you're already in that
Mm.
world and you want to be grounded with all the stuff you need to be a blockchain dev or a Web3 dev, all you need to know is what's in this little book. And then the world is your oyster, man. You can achieve anything, especially with the amount of learning tools that are out there, LLMs and other things. They'll answer your questions on this stuff. So yeah, they're my two bits of advice. And so hope just want to say as well one last thing. Hope everyone in the ecosystem is doing great. I know I haven't been on podcasts recently. I'll be on a lot more very soon. It's just been busy with my new baby daughter and stuff like that. So
Totally.
thank you, man, for having me on and reconnecting me with the community.
Of course, dude. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I've always enjoyed our conversations. I think you do a really good job of splitting that line between technical expertise and making this stuff understandable for folks. And it's always been my goal is to try to come at this stuff from first principles and just understand it and understand what works and not necessarily come in and buy all the Kool-Aid. So, sometimes I get in hot water because I try something out and you know what? I'm like, this doesn't work for this reason. And then, it happens, but I've never wanted to be a shiller. I always just wanted to be real about this stuff. And I think we've
Yeah.
built a pretty good audience because of it. So John, thanks so much for coming on. You're a real one. I appreciate that. Everyone out there too, thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. And